we got broadcast of this section, so we will be on TV. And I want to very happy and more than that, very collaborative, and I hope your participation can be good and great because we need your contributions. The idea of this workshop is to talk about the IoT for sustainable growth on the business perspective. We decided that not because we don't want to talk about any other perspective, but if you had the opportunity to attend the 3 previous sessions on IoT, you should realize those topics like security and privacy, and also about the infrastructure of IT, and also some topics on the interoperability has all been taken on this previous session. So our idea now is to talk about on the business perspective, but what we would like to see here today is how the IoT can provide and generate wealth for everyone. So how can we implement, how can we deploy Internet of Things systems, devices, or even websites, and get some benefits from that, but not giving back our back to the wealthy for everyone, not to giving back for the rest of the things like privacy and security and the other things that I have mentioned before. We proposed, as you may have seen in the short lines of this workshop, to make some questions or to get answers for some questions, like how to move from concept to reality, how to make this solution viable economically, and how to bring sensitive things in return to the citizen. And also we want to ask if the IoT improve processes in the way that public manager or the private sector can generate savings. So we also want to discuss about Internet of Things without giving back to the sustainable Millennium Goals. We have 6 speakers confirmed here. Here we have 5 of them, and one is will be with us in the remote participation. My task is not to talk a lot, but giving floor to you all, especially for the invited speakers, to give them contributions. So I would like to start with a remote contribution, and for that I would invite to Shadi Abuzara, who works for the W3C organization, and he is in Vienna, in Austria right now. So, Shadi, can you hear us? Are you ready to contribute?
Yes, hello, good evening from Vienna.
Okay, go ahead.
So my apologies, I don't have a camera, it's late in the evening. Very warm welcome, and unfortunately I could not be with you today. It's a very important topic, Internet of Things, and in W3C, in the World Wide Web Consortium, we are looking at what we call the Web of Things, which is the interface, the interoperability of those connected devices and sensors, and using the web platform as that mechanism to actually have those systems, those ecosystems, be able to talk to each other. And my specific area in W3C is to work on accessibility for people with disabilities. And in relevance of the Millennium Goals and ensuring sustainability, we must make sure that also the Internet of Things provides the same access and the same values to people with disabilities. In fact, the Internet of Things has a potential to further enhance accessibility for people with disabilities. For example, consider smart homes. For many years, those have been specially built devices for people with, say, physical disabilities to be able to switch on light bulbs and open doors and so on. And now you go to any store and buy those things off the shelf and plug it in. And we're seeing more of that. Things like self-driving cars, what that would be an opportunity for people with disabilities, but only if these things are in fact accessible. If you cannot actually identify as a blind person which one is your car that just drove up, then you have a trouble using this potential. And so these are the things that we want to look at, or that we are looking at W3C. One is having the web as an enabler for interoperability, which I think is the number one or one of the main issues in the Internet of Things. We have those different systems that have trouble talking. We are seeing already mini sensors and mini devices with minimal RAM that already speak HTTP and can convey their data on the web platform. And in the context of that is how we would address all the aspects of privacy and security and accessibility, what we call horizontal activities at W3C. And I'll stop there because I know we are short on time.
Thank you very much, Shaji. And now I will give the floor to Thales Marçal from the Ministry of Science and Information and Communication Technologies.
Innovation.
Or innovation, okay.
Hello, sorry, I don't speak English very good, so I made a speech and I read it for you, okay? Firstly, I'd like to thank the opportunity to represent the Ministry of Science, Technology, Innovation and Communication of Brazil at an event of the importance of the IGF in Guadalajara. In 2014, the ministry began the work of putting the various sectors of the Brazilian IoT ecosystem into a single table to discuss the development and implementation of the benefits generated by the IoT systems. For this multi-sectoral group was given the name of the Chamber of IoT. The Brazilian Chamber of IoT has representatives of the other federal government agencies, the ministries, the regulatory agencies, the public companies, representatives of the municipalities, the academy, universities and research institutes, the business associations, the hardware and software industry, and the support organizations for development of Brazil. In this direction, the ministry team, along with CGI Brazil and OECD, proposed the discussion to liberate the desire to implement the IoT for its real implementations based on sustainability. In our IoT readings, we identified that persons consuming applications such as smart home and wearables should be in use as soon as consumers realize that cost-benefit ratio is favorable, including in matters related to the privacy and security of information. However, applications for smart cities are not only based in this cost-benefit ratio, and therefore are more difficult to implement. The decisions to apply public resources in the cities such as São Paulo or Mexico City, for example, should take into account the financial economy generated by the investment of this public expenditure and the return of the perception of improvement of social welfare by the population. The measure used by politicians to identify the population's positive perception of the decisions taken, their popularity, and the votes that will be given on them in the next election. As for technologies, I believe that engineers are already very well prepared to implement the Internet of Things. Punctual issues will arise and soon there will be solutions to this case. Therefore, I believe that the implementation of the Internet of Things really depend on the development of the good business plan. The plans should respond on the expectations of the municipal decision makers, for example, the decision makers for the companies and the population affected by the applications. Finally, I'd like to inform you the MACIT is partnership with the National Bank for Economic and Social Development, the BNDES from Brazil, will sign next Monday, December 12, a technical cooperation term for mapping the Internet of Things in Brazil. In addition, a public consultation will be launched that will assist in the Brazilian strategy for this promising sector. For this, the BNDES hired a consortium of consultants to operationalize the mapping of the Brazil case. From the public consultations and the study of the Brazilian case, we hope that many of the dots related of the IoT sustainability development will be answered. Sorry for the mispronunciations of some words. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thales. Now I give the floor to Marcia from the Deloitte Consulting Services.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Marcia Ogawa. I am the lead partner for telecommunications, media, and technology for Deloitte Brazil. And thank you so much for inviting me for this honorable discussion. And let me give you a brief background. For the last 2 or 3 years, I have been one of the enthusiasts of IoT in Brazil. And Deloitte is one of the leaders in the globe in order to promote IoT. And my mission is to help the Brazilian government, the Brazilian companies, and the Brazilian society to embrace this new economic paradigm. I would say that is economic paradigm because I strongly believe that IoT will change significantly how we live, how the companies are organized. And as Mr. Thales told, that Brazil has just launched the National IoT Plan, and I strongly believe that it will be a fundamental initiative to guide our country to face the new economic cycle. I'm sure the next generations of Brazilians will be proud of the key and bold decisions taken today. So the idea here is to explain how we can use IoT to build a sustainable society. Brazil has several challenges. One challenge is economic, that we are facing a huge economic situation. And secondly, Brazil is a very diverse society. So we have in the same country, like different countries under the same ceiling. And so it's very hard to build a national IoT plan. So my idea is that we need to segment the country first by regions, and I would say not geographic regions, but use a combination of economic vocation, quality of labor force, quality of telecommunication infrastructure, and attractiveness of companies, and especially external investments. And each region should drive a business plan. Also, I have seen several attempts to segment the country by industry verticals. And I'm pretty sure that industry verticals will change significantly due to the new digital society. So linear supply chains does not exist anymore. technologies and new customer behavior will change significantly how the companies are organized. So in our experience, there are 8 pillars that needs to be considered for a good business plan for the country. First, the strategy and vision, the country or the region or the city. Strategy and vision. We need to have a clear vision of what want to be achieved and a strategy to realize this ambition. And the strategy needs to address the 3 pillars of sustainability: economic, social, and environmental. Secondly, we need to take care of the attractiveness. And usually the Latin America countries has been so closed, but we need to attract external investments. We need to attract the collaboration, external collaboration. Third, private and public ecosystem. Several persons ask me if it's more in public or more in the private, but I would say in a combination of both. The government needs to play a strong role in helping identifying the opportunities in the country and help gather the parties or build the local ecosystems. Openness, communication and technology. I would say that broadband is a prerequisite, and in Brazil we have a national broadband national plan, which will be very important to make all this happen. And sixth, data. It's also important to have not only the collections of silos of data, but a combination of how we can use and extract the different data from different projects. And also, seventh, it will be projects and solutions. I have seen so many initiatives that are isolated, that does not communicate each other. And we do need to have those projects and programs that needs to end up in a big opportunity that really create value to the region or to the city. And eighth, there are skills and competencies. Everybody says that IoT requires new skills. I definitely agree. And lastly, I would like to touch the impacts of technology and unemployment. For sure, the application of technology could provoke the decrease of jobs in a specific area. But in my opinion, we Latin Americans cannot fear of that impact. We need to put our efforts in building new society, requalifying our labor force, and creating new types of jobs. We cannot delay and put barriers in adopting new technologies. These actions will deepen the abysses between our countries and the developed world. The worst thing that could happen in our country is to demotivate the talents and provoke a brain drain. Let those talents, tech-savvy, open-minded young people in each respective Latin America countries absorb the new technologies. They are the ones to build a more inclusive and open society. And here, IoT plays an important role. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcia. And now I give the floor to Pedro Malo.
Okay, sorry. So good afternoon. I'm Pedro from Portugal. I'm a professor at the University of Lisbon, and I'm also a researcher on IoT, and I'm also an entrepreneur in IoT. So I have a company that is developing IoT technology. So I bring about the views, the multiple views from academy, from research, and also from business. I have here a set of points that I prepared. I'm trying to go a bit through them. And I think that for starters, looking a bit of IoT, I think IoT is a reality right now. We are surrounded by IoT. I have actually an IoT in my wrist. It gives my heartbeat, and it has also an accelerometer. It has a gyroscope. It has data. This data can be communicated to the web or to my smartphone, which is the way that it communicates. This is Apple Watch 1 just. So second already talks with the internet directly. And all of your mobile phones actually are also IoT devices. They have multiple sensors, they have microphones, they have gyroscopes, accelerometers, cameras, and they communicate this data to the web. So actually, so just to say that the IoT in this room is already quite high, and the more we evolve, the more IoT we'll see in our lives. And I think I have also an IoT, nice IoT system here, because I'm talking, and that thing there is translating my speech directly to text. I'm actually trying to chase that system to see if it manages to do what it's supposed to do, but the way, I don't know how it works, but I presume that basically I speak here, it goes to the web somewhere, to a server around, or maybe on the web, and it's getting the data, and so it's also kind of an IoT application right here. So we are surrounded by IoT in this room. Talking about IoT, and I think I will give you a view of Europe, because I'm a European and Portuguese, so bring about also the view of Europe. We have, starting this year, a very ambitious plan on IoT. We call it the Thriving IoT Ecosystem, and it's built around three big pillars. The first pillar is about open platforms, open solutions. It's one of the very important things that we push about in Europe, is about open technologies. The second one is looking at the priority markets where Europe is strong, especially we are talking about industry, also agriculture, also autonomous cars. So several of the domains, the markets where we are strong, and so we are pushing also a lot on that. And the third one, the third very important pillar is human-centered IoT. So we are looking about an IoT that accounts for people, that doesn't create another digital divide, and that is, let's say, private, secure, and trusted. Okay? And trusted is the key word. The trusted IoT is what we are trying to build on. Okay? How are we doing about this? So the Commission has funded, the European Commission has funded 100 million euros in a program for an IoT pilot, a set of IoT pilots, which is one of the ways, one of the solutions to solve the problem of going from concept to reality, is to prove technologies first, to see if they work, to see what are the things that it works better, what are the things that doesn't work so well. So we are doing pilots, IoT pilots, with substantial amount of money, European-wide, on domains such as smart agriculture and food security, on autonomous cars, on aging well, on smart cities, and on wearables. So we are doing 5 big pilots. Total budget on that is 100 million euro for doing that. Okay. Another thing that we are also doing and funding is experimental infrastructures. So spaces, areas in cities, in buildings, in environments where we can experiment with the technology first before going to the market. So there is quite a vast investment in these technologies, and even we created a smart city, which is Smart Santander, funded by the Commission, to experiment with IoT technologies. Okay? So that's another way to go to the market and to experiment with people, real people, a living lab, before, of course, going to the mass market. So experimental infrastructures. So trying now to talk a bit about the questions that have been posed. Basically, the first one is about the stakeholders, and my problem with the stakeholders is exactly who pays for the Internet of Things. Okay, and this is the big issue. The IoT depends on what IoT we are talking about, but if we are talking, for instance, about smart cities, there might be needing a big infrastructure for collecting data, for getting data somewhere, for then being able to reason on the data, and who pays for this? So this is one of the big problems of the IoT today. Is I think the business model is clear. I think the value is very clear. The problem is there the money to pay for it? And it's not so clear that the money is there, because what I see in the funding is that most of the funding that is coming about, it needs to come from state and from people, from citizens. And citizens are a bit worried about paying a new infrastructure that the value is not so clear for them. So this is one of the big problems. The other problem is how to monetize the Internet of Things. So how can we get the money out of the Internet of Things, and how do we make sure that the taxes that this money will generate will stay in the countries? Because it will be very easy to move the Internet of Things monetization to, let's say, an offshore or even for a low-tax country, and then we are getting another level of a problem. And these problems we need to address in this domain. Okay, but there are solutions, and so talking about arrangements for stakeholders that can work. For instance, I'll give you an example of what we are doing in Portugal, in Almada, which we are creating a very smart infrastructure for IoT data collection, where we are using the water towers. We installed routers on top of the water towers, and it enables communication, IoT communications for collecting data. And because they are in the highest point in the city, it's very easy to install a few of them and do a very big coverage in the city. So with a small smartness of doing things, you can install some nice infrastructure and expect things to happen. Okay. About employment, of course, that IoT will create, and every digital revolution that has come about in the world has made problems in terms of employment, and people have lost jobs because jobs disappeared, but new jobs has appeared. So I think the IoT will create new jobs, will create new economics, will create new business, and I think that we should not at least be so worried about that. We need to consider them, we need to address them, but I think we need to consider that as something that will happen as any other digital revolution. My view is, but talking about policy, I'm not a politician, but I think that the systems like flexi-security, as you've seen it in Denmark in the 90s, work very well, because you can do both things. You can have a very accelerated economic growth and technological base, but then you have a security system that is paid also by the employees, in order to anyone that loses a job can get back in the system in different ways and can get training to get back in the system. This is very important things to do, but the way I see it, countries only change fundamental things when they are in crisis, like Portugal was in the last at least 10 years' time. And fundamental things only change in survival mode. So I think it will be very difficult for things to change in the future, in this respect. In terms of regulation, okay, regulation. Sometimes the best regulation is not to do anything; is to stay put and let the market work and see what happens. And think that this is one of the ways for states to operate. But there are other things that can do. For instance, talking about Brazil, that we know so well, there are problems with communications in Brazil, and there's a lot of costs in the communications in Brazil, and so there is something that needs to be solved in the communication domains for IoT to develop. Okay. For instance, in the European Union, we have also a problem, which is the roaming. There is the roaming between states, between countries in the European Union, and by July 2017, roaming will disappear. So roaming is one of the limitations that is also hampering the IoT applications, like any other applications, internet applications. So these things need to disappear. These, let's say, things that are creating still frontiers in the system, and maybe in that also things that can move on. Okay. Privacy and security. Just a few words on that. Of course, privacy and security is an issue. All the others have talked about that at workshops. Very clear. It has happened that the cyber attack on the 21st of October 2016 was an attack of the IoT on the internet, and it was really an attack of the IoT on the internet. So it means that for sure in the future we'll see the IoT disrupting and attacking the internet much more, because of course it's easier to enter on IoT devices. It's the security measures are less developed, and there are many manufacturers that are doing stuff, so it's much more difficult to have a good security schemes on the IoT. And how do we go about that? Well, in Europe, that is what we are trying to do with this IoT trusted label, which is to create kind of a label where you put a mark then on your device and you say, okay, my device, it has passed a series of certification, a series of labeling mechanisms, has passed some even some tests that needs to be done, and okay, it's trusted, it's secure, and it works. Okay, and this is very similar. Like for instance, if you know Apple MFI, which is made for iPhone, for iPad or whatever it's called, it's a program like that. So basically, if you want to have a device In the Apple HomeKit, for instance, to talk with the Apple devices ecosystem, you need to pass to that certification scheme, and that certification scheme ensures that security is addressed. Okay. And finally, just open data. I'm a bit skeptical about open data because, at least it's me, public open data and even more private open data, because, okay, we can put the data out there, but it's not so clear what people can do about it. And I think here we have to do a bit of a leap of faith, and the idea would be, let's put the data out there, let's create the data, let's put it out there, in the sense that we need to do it even for transparency, we need to do it even for openness, so we need to do it anyway, and we should do it anyway, and then let's see what people do with it. Every time that we put something out there and do something into the system, people marvel us with much nice things that we didn't think at start. And I think sometimes we need to do these kind of things. We put things there and see what happens. Okay? So this is my points of contribution.
Okay, thank you, Pedro. Very good contribution. And now I would like to invite to speak Saul Pottergy. Oh, yes, Pottergy. Okay, from OECD.
So, thank you, Chair. While they're bringing up the presentation, which was loaded on the laptop, my name is Sam Poltridge, I'm from the OECD. So, my presentation follows nicely from Pedro's, who said the internet is all around us. So, I have a different way of showing that. You can have fun on this website, if you like. You can see turtles being tracked, you can see environmental monitoring devices. I've just zoomed in there on Guadalajara. This is kind of the public Internet of Things. That's why it's accessible, and that's why you can see that it is indeed all around us. Now, the Internet of Things, as Pedro said, there's an enormous number of devices being connected to the Internet. I like to track this by looking at those that use IP addresses. Of course, there's different definitions of the Internet of Things, and I'm always amazed when I see IP addresses on devices. The thing about the Internet of Things, though, is that we still don't know what the demand for different aspects of the Internet of Things will be. Do you need your washing machine connected to the Internet? I'm not sure I do, but it's certainly possible. So about 5 years ago, we played a game at the OECD where we sat around and thought, you know, in 5 years' time, how many devices will be connected to the Internet? And it's easy to start to run up very large numbers. We just looked at a family of four and what, you know, back then we thought people might be connecting to the Internet. Today there's obviously a lot more devices that can be connected. I'm going to concentrate on one aspect today, which is transport, because I want to look at sustainability. The transport that's all around us is connected to the Internet in ways that you probably realise if you hire a bike in Paris, if you catch a bus in London, you see the bus stop is connected to the Internet. Again, you're seeing IP addresses there. That's booting up to start. Or a tram in The Hague. You can see the IP address up the top there. Actually, there's a number of IP addresses along the side of the tram you might be able to see in the yellow colour.
How did you find the pictures?
Sorry?
How did you find the pictures?
I'm collecting them. I do ask permission. I've put a list of items there. Pedro's already discussed some of them. I haven't got time in the 7 minutes that I have to go through some of these. So I'm just going to pick on traffic. Now, those of you that have been coming to this event for a while or even have a longer history with the Internet will always have heard about data tsunamis, how something new was going to happen that was going to overwhelm the Internet. And quite frankly, I've always been very sceptical about that because the technology has basically evolved and in many ways run ahead of the demand. Today with transport, I'm not quite so sure about that, and I want to just talk about it in the few minutes I have, perhaps stimulate some questions from you. The thing about internet traffic, if you look at a lot of the debates that are policy or regulatory debates, they're around services that generate a lot of traffic. Just for example, I've used Sandvine's traffic there. They monitor a group of individuals, see what their traffic is. You can see many familiar names there in North America. For downloads, traffic sites like Netflix, YouTube. You can also see uploads there, and you can see what people are sending most. You know, it may surprise some people to know you're actually sending a lot of traffic when you download Netflix because they're monitoring the performance of the system. But download overwhelmingly dominates traffic, and most people think about downloads because you perhaps in a home that Sandvine would monitor, you might download 7 or 8 times more traffic than you send. And so I want you to just keep that in mind. We're connecting more things all the time to the internet, and one of the ways is through machine to machine. So a car will have 2 SIM cards, one for telemetry, one for entertainment. And we're tracking this now at the OECD, so we collect the number of SIM cards. It's steadily increasing, but companies like AT&T today sell more SIM cards for cars than they do for people. If you look at the traffic of connected cars, it's actually not that much today. So the average connected car sends about, well, say a quarter of what you use as just having a smartphone. So that kind of traffic is very manageable. And I've put the example there of Chevy. They don't break it down, but you can do your estimates yourself by the number of cars they're connecting and the amount of traffic each month. But it's very manageable. It's nothing that can't be handled by today's technology. But if you've seen some of the recent presentations by Intel, the Intel CEO basically is saying that a driverless car will be generating the same amount of traffic as about 3,000 smartphone users. Now, today's technology is a long way off being able to handle something like that. So remember that I said about downloading more data than sending. So we don't know about driverless cars. We just don't know the demands they're going to place on networks. And we don't know what that will mean for infrastructure. But clearly they're going to generate a lot of data. And so that leads to just some questions that I'm going to put up there as I finish. How much of that needs to be in real time? Well, we don't really know that. You know, we think that some of it will be downloaded when the car is in the garage. But if you're talking about a lot of the applications that people have for driverless cars, obviously a lot of it might be car to car over short range and so forth. But other data to be useful to people that are further down the highway to tell them that there's ice on the road or there's been an accident or whatever information that driverless cars need to function in an efficient way, we really don't know what that's going to do in terms of generating traffic and how much of that needs to be transmitted in real time. And that's a real question that I think is out there. And for sustainability, which is why I chose this subject, I think that's an open question. You know, clearly in the next few years we're going to have 5G. We haven't got a standard yet, but we're moving in that direction. That's going to be able to handle a lot more data. It's going to have all sorts of implications for smaller cells and so forth. But there's going to be enormous challenges. You know, even what people are talking about with 5G couldn't handle the types of amounts of traffic that people are talking about with driverless cars. So how are we going to backhaul that traffic? Are we going to need internet exchange points everywhere? What's going to happen with peering and transit? Because there's going to be an enormous amount of data exchanged between different players. And then, of course, we can end with questions about network neutrality and traffic prioritisation. Pedro mentioned who's going to pay for this. So the pricing is going to be very interesting. Is it going to be sponsored? You know, when you buy your car, are you going to buy the access with that? Is it going to be some other model? Are people going to introduce congestion pricing in the same way we have congestion pricing for cars themselves? Who knows? There's just an enormous amount of questions that are out there in terms of the sustainability. So I just raised them as questions. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam, for your contribution. And now the last speaker, I invite Serge Mevombo to give your contribution.
Hi. Sorry again for being late. I underestimated the traffic in Guadalajara. That's a good segue to Sam there. My name is Serge Vongo. I represent Qualcomm. Qualcomm is a tech company. We essentially in every single, if you own a smartphone today, we are in there somehow, either providing compute or we're doing connectivity. So we are very much at the forefront of looking at the IoT and how we bring technology and some of the changes we are thinking in terms of 5G or be able to today, if you have a cellular device, it's sending too much data, but there's obviously technology to be able to do that a little better. Qualcomm, about a few years back, started looking at the space, and we understood that, first of all, IoT is not only things, it's who uses it, who benefits from it. And if you think about it a little bit in those senses, you will understand that there are probably about three categories. There's IoT for the consumer, so Alexa, Siri, your washing machine, and where consumers are the ones making the final purchase decisions. There's IoT for enterprise, so if you are a water meter or an electric company or a large facilities, what kinds of technologies you want to bring out there. And then the last piece really, and that's a big piece, affects a lot of people, are cities and government. So how does the city go about doing things? So one thing we've then determined is we had to look at first the economics. So I manage business development. So from an economic standpoint, what role does the private sector have to play? And how do we define the sales cycle in IoT? So if I'm selling to an end consumer, obviously, I'm going to have some partners that are end distributors. But if you are putting a solution for cities and government, it has to really be a common approach with city folks, regulators, and also some of the providers. So we actually broke down the company that way as we're looking at IoT and making sure that we're looking at that as such. I will say that from a positioning standpoint, where we looked at it, we start, but it's one thing that is common. You will need connectivity, but what kind of connectivity depends on the use case. So, for instance, if I'm connecting a car, it's not the same as being in a factory automation building. So whatever solution is provided has to really meet the use case being resolved. So I can't just say it's all cellular. I have to say city government, facilities decision maker, please ask your vendor, is this the best technical solution for my problem? It's really the first case. And then the second piece, in cities and sustainability, it's really interoperability and standards. If you think about your traditional city, you have different departments, water, electric, transport. If by the end you have done implementing your solution, those separate units do not talk to each other, you may have a fantastic transport system, but your water and electric system may be putting down the system. So the city doesn't really have the economics benefits of all that integration. So, and I think, I won't say open data, there's a lot of word about it, but it's more, it's good to have the data available such that maybe for a city, citizens that are facing the problem can develop applications on top that the city can use in the long term. And then at that point, it's just a matter of how do we put that together. A good example we have today in this kind of world where you have government, city, private sector is in New York City, where, you know, the city was really feeling the pain of their payphones. If you are in New York, you pay 25 cents, you make a phone call, and citizens started complaining that it's ugly and nobody uses it. So the city felt like there was a benefit there, and one thing they did is they had an RFP where that said, hey, a tender that said, we would like the private sector and folks to propose solution to us, such that, first of all, the key benefit would be that we would like to provide internet access for every single citizen in New York by this time, free of charge to the city, with no tax raises and no bonds. So at that point, it becomes a challenge to folks that are trying to apply in this tender to figure out, how am I going to make money? And how is the city going to be able to make money? So, and then the next step is, do you have the right partners? If I want to have business economics in New York or in Guadalajara, am I working with somebody who understands the people in Guadalajara, right? So, and those are in terms of selling content. So we set up a consortium with a couple of local advertising firms and content firms in New York. And I'm going to just transit into employment. This was also an example of employment generation within the city, because the city mandated that any new manufacturing be done within the city of New York. So they can only hire there, and they can only hire content development within the city of New York. And also, this is public, it's out there. You know, the city is will get revenue out of this over the next 10, 12 years. So they're getting revenue because the revenue model is all based on advertisement. And that's because New York, you can do that. You have Manhattan, you can sell ads. But maybe in other places in the world, you can do other things. I'm originally from Cameroon. I was born there. I'm sure there's a lot of people that like to make phone calls, card tapes, and those kinds of things. So it's a local problem for cities. Now, enterprises are looking at it in efficiency. Let's suppose you manage 10 buildings, and that you can find a way to use IoT to increase productivity of the employee. You cannot foresee no ROI out of that. And we did a good commercial example that's in San Diego. We went to our own, this team, our own facilities team, where they know that their bill, the largest bill was electricity. So they had to figure out a way to reduce that. We used some sensors connected into our network, and they are able to show some returns right now. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's not about just a single use case. It's really, you have to break it down to the typical use cases. And I'll touch on security and privacy. A lot of time when we talk about security, we think about just the internet piece. But what we really, as we're talking to different vendors, we really want to make sure that vendors understand that before the data reaches your data center or the internet, it goes through the sensors. So it's important for them to ask, what kind of security policies are on the edge? And are they global type standards? Or is it a private network? Because it's a private network, typically it's not as robust as standards that 20, 40 countries have agreed to. So that's one piece. Privacy, on the contrary, is about what your regulation and really what your people can accept, right? In New York, it was very clear that they told us, hey, no cameras. New Yorkers don't want cameras, so you're going to have to respect that one another. If not, you're going to get backlash from the people you're trying to serve. So it's really about trying to find out, with regulation, with global understanding, but a local presence on how you actually deal with privacy. And I think the last one has to do with network and that kind of stuff. we think that in the 2020s, you are going to think about not sending all the data over the big cellular carriers. There are going to be potentially some private networks where, I really have my private telecommunication network where it doesn't go over, Telcel or AT&T or whatever. And that may make sense for an electrical company or a security company because they want to have that tight control over it. So it's just a matter of what the use case is. And I'll stop there and maybe get some questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Serge, for your contribution. So, of course, there are an enormous questions to be responded to. What it's going to be, it's not to be easy. Just wrapping up what we heard and call my attention is that everybody, or almost everybody, spoke about the human beings to be the center of the IoT. Using different words, they said multi-stakeholder ecosystem, human-centered IoT, or who's going to be the interface with human beings in IoT. So everybody's concerned about the presence of human beings as a real actor in IoT ecosystem. The other thing that caught my attention was about some of you talked about the data and how important is data for the Internet of Things as an value, as important content for the Internet of Things work out. So some also said the importance of open data and also the open platform. And the other thing, the last one that caught my attention is that at least 2 or 3 in this panel mentioned the importance of pilot projects or some projects that can show how IoT can benefit people. And Serge mentioned at the end that we have to focus in different groups like IoT for consumer, IoT for enterprise, IoT for citizen and government, and maybe these 3 different groups has different approach, and the IoT has not to be the same for everyone, okay? So now I open the floor for everyone, and I would like to hear from you, your questions, your comment about the main topic. Please feel free, if you can raise your hand, please. Okay.
Edmund Chung here from .Asia. I find all 3 speakers converging on a few things, as you've summarized, in terms of open data, in terms of tsunami of data, and different cases where data converge. And I wanted to respond to the last comment. Actually, I think that's very interesting for me, is that while we think that all this data is going to create a lot of traffic, but if we look back at how videos, for example, on the internet eventually worked out, we had content delivery networks which kind of pushed the traffic back to the edge. And I think what was mentioned about how private networks, or the networks not necessarily depending on the I guess the GSM or cellular network, that's gonna happen, especially for probably for the consumer and for the enterprise as well, and that relates a lot to what we mean by open data. I think open data really is much more towards the IoT for city, where the transparency is important, where the interpretation of that data, I guess the reason for the transparency is the interpretation of that data could be checked by multiple parties, not just by whoever has the exclusive access to that data, and that's probably important. So whether the traffic stays on-net or I guess quasi-off-net. Really what we're calling off-net might actually be private networks or something like the content delivery networks that stays more in the local area than fully global, because ultimately data doesn't have, not all the data needs to pass through the global network all the time, and that is I think we're moving into that type of, at least we should be moving into that area, that direction, and well actually ourselves, we're experimenting with some pilot about how that data can be kept back in Hong Kong, and also at our organization with doing some pilots about how that data can be kept within local area networks or private networks, and then shared selectively to the open network, and how that model can be. So, I think that's I like the idea that was presented at the last point, and I think that really needs to be a direction that we explore further.
Okay, thanks. Who else? First here and then over there.
I'm Hilani Galpaya from Learn Asia, a regional think tank working in South Asia and Southeast Asia. So along the things that, like quality and capacity of networks, another problem is capacity of human beings. So somebody was talking about open data, and it seems very government-centric, the approach and the speakers. In my part of the world, the data for IoT are the mobile phones, as one of the people said. And we work with call detail records and VLRs in the future to not do telecom stuff, but to answer questions related to SDGs. Poverty mapping, where do poor people live, how much do they earn? Transport planning, where do they come from and where do they go to work? How is the nature of the city changing from commercial to residential and back to commercial? All of these things are answerable primarily through private sector data that lies with the telecom operators, which is very difficult to access, even for our governments. But that has to be combined with government data from the national census offices. These are completely divergent entities, and we are a completely third party outside from the not-for-profit sector who just happen to have the capacity to do this kind of analysis. All of these three things need to come together. The assumption that our government, certainly in my part of the world, will have the finances, wherewithal, or the capacity to set up central initiatives of the type that you were talking about, I think is not realistic. So we really need to talk about how different sectors come together and use this data.
Thank you very much. I'm Ana Neves from Portugal. And I would like to raise a very basic question. I don't want to talk about the business model because there are several business models. Louder? Okay, like that. So, but I think that you understood that I want to ask something very basic. It's not about the business model, but about the possibility to have internet everywhere, anytime. I mean, Internet of Things, it has a potential, it's enormous potential of leapfrogs anytime. But I think that you have a limitation because you don't have internet everywhere. And the point that we have the sensors, we have the collection of data to be processed later on, I think that it limits the potential of Internet of Things. So I would like to know the opinion from the panelists about this, because I really think that there is something really missing here, is Internet everywhere, anytime. Thank you.
First,
Okay.
and then you can follow me.
That's a very good question. That's a question that comes up quite a bit. Unfortunately, the reality is that it's not free. So the internet doesn't happen in the cloud. So there has to be somebody who actually gets the infrastructure in, whether it's a Google sending their stuff, their satellites up to the end. But the end result is, if I give you free internet, are you willing for me to look at, I get the data that I get from it? So, those kind of privacy discussions where I can actually use the data. You have internet for free, but I use the data to potentially sell to businesses. So it's really a very good question, but I think we have to keep that in mind. And second of all, really, it's from a government standpoint, you can think about cities doing a few different things. New York did it for them because the economics work. It's free. It's going to be free by 2020. You go in there, you just log in. But somebody had to pay for it, and there has to be economics behind it. That's just reality.
Yeah, I think first his questions in terms of the edge computing. So I think it's very important to design the perfect architecture because what you mentioned is that more and more computation could be in the edge, especially in an Internet of Things world. So it's heavily dependent on the way you design this architecture. And definitely, we do not need anymore to upload everything on the net because you can solve several, you can put smart and analytics in the edge. So robotics in the edge. Those are the things that will come up very soon. So concerning to the Internet of Everywhere, I think we needed to build the connections where it makes sense. As he said, it costs. Somebody has to pay. So that's the reason that we need to come up from the business model and really identify what makes sense to be connected.
I can give also some comments. For your comment, which was basically a comment, I agree with you. I didn't mention that because I didn't want to waste a lot of time. But yes, because the approach of edge computing and fog computing, it's one of the ways to solve the data tsunami, and we are already experimenting with that in Europe. We have a lot of trials doing edge computing, even in production environments and manufacturing, to know not only to do the, let's say, the data stay in the edge of the application domain, but also to do local analytics and to learn locally, and even to synchronize several edges to have, let's say, a local view between some domains, and you are able to reason with partial information. Of course, this will happen. I think this is very clear. We, from an engineering point of view, will solve the problem. I think it will be difficult because we don't know how much data is coming about with the cars, but at the end, we will solve the problem. We have solved the problem every time. So even if we develop new ways of doing it, if we put edge computing, I don't really see that the problem is technical. We always solve the problem technically. We always solve the problem. So, because we are smart people, right? We solve problems, right? Globally, right? Globally, we are smart people. We solve engineering problems. The others more difficult, political problems, and other problems more difficult to solve because we are not so able to do it. About the question of, actually, I don't agree with you because I think that we will have internet everywhere. And the more we go, the more internet we will have every time, everywhere, every place. And if we see in Europe, maybe in other places not so clear, but in Europe, every place that we go, we have internet. Some places we don't have internet, but okay, it's few places. I think the tendency will be to have internet all over the place, mobile internet all the time. And we have to think about this, if this is a problem or not. But even in places where we don't have internet, it's no problem because we can have data being generated, and I go there with the data mule that comes about and passes with the data stuff and brings the data back to, let's say, the internet. Or even, I think that when you're talking about Internet of Things, at least my perspective, it doesn't, the data in the things doesn't need to be connected to the internet. It needs to use internet technology. So if you have a domain using internet technologies but is not connected to the internet, for me it's Internet of Things. So it means that I don't need to have internet access even to have an Internet of Things. So at the end, I think this will happen every place, everywhere, respectively of if we have internet or not, but we will have internet everywhere. Everywhere we'll have internet. I don't know if you agree, you guys agree with me, but the tendency will be to have internet. I think I see the future in, let's say, 50 years' time, I don't know, a future where we pay for an infrastructure which is a worldwide infrastructure. We pay a little bit, and I have access everywhere. We already are starting to have that in Europe, right? In July 2017, all of Europe will have internet. We go everywhere, and we pay a bit for our part. I pay in Portugal, but I have access in all of Europe. And I think that will go when we go to the US, and then we go to Brazil or to South America or Mexico, and at the end, we will pay a bit for a global infrastructure that we connect everywhere where we are. At least this is my vision of the future. One day.
Well, please use the mic.
And when you mentioned everywhere, I thought that you were mentioning internet in every object, or you're talking about everywhere in terms of places. Okay.
For me, it's
Okay.
not good enough to have
Okay.
the collection of data and then waiting for the
Okay,
processing of
yeah, in this
such
case, I
data.
agree with you. Yeah, I thought that your question was everywhere in terms of every object.
Okay, we still have some comments, remote comments, please. Shadi, can you hear us?
Yes, I was very encouraged by the previous speaker, the optimism. I did want to touch upon the aspect of people, and I think we've talked about that before, and there were some questions on that. So we do have the digital divide, and this is a problem that we have not yet solved, unfortunately, and that's a real challenge in many ways, in terms of affordability, but also in terms of skills, and in terms of accessibility for people with disabilities. And in going forward, I think this is going to be yet another, I mean, already now on the quote-unquote traditional internet, we have people who are being left behind. I think that's one of the main reasons for the IGF in the first place, and you know, why we're sitting around the room trying to resolve those issues. And as technology moves forward, there is a huge potential to solve many problems, but also great challenges. And I think we need to put this really in the focus with all the data and all the technologies that we've been talking about right now. One of the questions is, do people have the skills? Will they be able to turn on their light bulbs? Will they be able to you know, use all those technologies in the first place? Or how will we really reap the benefits so that we can realize not only the business benefit, but the social contract that we as a community have?
Okay, before moving to Stan, again, I have to read a contribution, a remote contribution from Amos Vusa. He was supposed to be also a speaker here, remote speaker, but he had a technical problem, so he sent us his contribution. So here it is. Thank you for inviting me to part of this workshop and share the African perspective. My name is Amos Vusa from Farmer Line Limited in Ghana, and we are into solutions that bridge the communication gap and data collection, mostly from the rural communities. As IoT is new, it's even a challenge for Africa than an innovation. This is because almost 60% to 70% of people live in the rural settings with low connectivity. It is therefore more difficult to implement IoT solutions and make it more sustainable. And that is IoT projects in Africa, just like WASIOP is focused on low cost and low energy consumption and long-range communication devices. It's very important because for the rural farmer to be able to benefit and pay for such device goes beyond just the data collected, but the predictive and information delivery in the most simplest form. The value of IoT to the educated is very clear, but for Africa, where most of the people live on a very low income, it's important to consider how to move from funded projects and research and make IoT solutions ready for market products. IoT Solutions for Smart Agriculture in Africa is considering how to make the over 75% smallholder farmers benefit from their less than 2-acre farms. It's also important to consider that data security and privacy, even though most of the African countries have no open regulations to protect their citizens. And it is the reason why the internet is mostly used by the few who have access and don't understand the implications of sharing every data. It also makes it difficult to convince the rural farmer what IoT is and how they will benefit. As the world tries to connect everything to the internet, it's important to roll in the rural communities who mostly make up the majority and grow almost 75% of world food. It's therefore important to consider the low energy and the long-range communications device so as to reduce the cost of implementing IoT solutions and build sustainable business modules around them. Thank you, and I would like to end here. Okay, thank you, Amos, for your contribution. Now, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Just to respond to a couple of the points made. First, to start with my neighbour, I think you're absolutely right. And the internet has been remarkable in both keeping traffic local and developing more local solutions, and that's certainly a way to do that. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Traffic really wants to stay local, and part of the solution to some of the challenges I was mentioning before certainly is keeping that traffic local. You also made the point about private networks, and I think you're absolutely right there. Hospitals or factories will generate lots of data, but that doesn't need to be transmitted over the internet. Why I highlighted driverless cars was to go to Eleni's point about the exchange of information. You know, to go to the environment that people are talking about, a lot of this data does have to be transmitted, and it has to go between different networks, different providers, different manufacturers, and that's part of the challenge here. And if you think about that in terms of the telecoms infrastructure, you've got to start to think about the backhaul. And yes, you may have lots of fibre in the cities, but there's lots of highways where there may be fibre, but there won't be off-ramps. And those sorts of challenges are going to be, it's going to be necessary to think about that as to how you deal with that traffic. And finally, on tsunamis, you know, most of the Internet of Things doesn't generate a lot of traffic. It's you know, environmental sensors and things like that do not generate a lot of traffic. And again, a lot of traffic doesn't need to go to the internet, but if we're going to have some things where that needs to be transmitted, then there may be challenges. And Pedro says that the technology will run ahead. Well, it always has. I think it's an open question this time for driverless cars. And I think it's just something that we can talk about over the coming years. We don't have many years to talk about it because they're coming very quickly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have to move to an end. So I would invite the panelists who want to speak some final words, perhaps saying how the business point of view would answer or respond for the questions raised in this panel. So who wants to talk? So feel free to give the final words. So perhaps 2, 3, or all of us, if you want to say something. Okay?
No.
So,
Sir. Just quickly, I think for the technology is there, and I think we are moving towards it. 5G, narrowband IoT, unlicensed spectrum are going to make differences in the cost of implementing some of these solutions. So you could potentially set up a smaller, cheaper network in a remote place in Africa that does not need all the bells and whistles, and that's happening in the 2018, 2019 timeframe. But really, it's important that we think about it in terms of open interoperability, such that if Western Europe develops a standard or something that works, that could be transmitted to Eastern Europe, or if you're moving to Hong Kong or Indonesia. So that standardization of solutions, I think, is very important. And I think the last key really is processing at the edge. I think you touched on it, and making sure that the data we only offload data that needs to go up the internet, and you can have actionable information right there.
Thank you.
Yeah. In terms of business point of view, I think the technology is already available, and there are relevant business cases even in countries in Latin America. And if we not do this, others will do on our behalf.
Okay, very last comment. I think it's great to be part of this Internet of Things world. It's a new world. We lived the internet. It's in one lifetime we will live the internet. We will live the Internet of Things. What other Internet of what we can live on? It's fast growing thing, and I think there's a lot of potential for this Internet of Things, and a lot of money that can be generated. And I expect also not only money, but maybe a new societal model, maybe a new way of involving people in the society, in the politics, because we are so set aside from politics, and strange things happen, like in the US, like in France, like in Austria, right? Things are starting to be strange. So we need to bring people back again to the stand and involve. And I think the Internet of Things can also do this. A new accountability, new openness, new transparency, everything of these things, I think it's important. And the Internet of the Things can make it happen.
Okay, it's time to finish. And you may realize that we don't talk a lot about privacy, security, trust, interoperability, because all of these topics have been already taken in the previous sessions. And so our focus was the Internet of Things in the business point of view, and I hope that you will enjoy to be with us. Thank you very much for you all, and especially I want to thank the invited speakers, and including those who are remotely participating. Thank you very much for all. Thank you, Serge, for your contribution. Thank you very much.
So much delay in playing.
Yeah.
So these videos and stuff, where they
Will be available. Will be available later, including a report on this workshop. Also will be available.